One of the things I really appreciate about your books is the humor. Thank you for, little bits of, just little funny bits. And there are 2 bits of humor in the Wheel of Time, your Wheel of Time section. If you don't want to say whether you did them or not, but I've always wanted to know.
Okay.
They're both about Matt. They come out of a certain town called Hinderstap.
Yes.
And his final comment about the pies.
Mm-hmm.
And later he has this glorious thing about boots.
Yes, those are both me. That's and Matt is probably the most noticeably different of the characters. And I feel bad about that. At the same time, there's certain life experiences Robert Jordan had that allowed him to do Matt as he did Matt that I just haven't had. And so getting Matt right was very hard. And so I wanted Matt to make sure that Matt was at least humorous. I've always really loved Matt, but getting him right was hard. I think I actually did the humor in Towers of Midnight more like Robert Jordan would have done it. And in Gathering Storm, it's more like I tend to do it. And I really tried to match Robert Jordan better in Towers of Midnight. So it's kind of a half proud of, half not proud of that I've made you laugh because I think those are great lines, but I worry sometimes that that not all of them fit. But the boots thing is from Towers of Midnight, and I feel like I got a little closer to how Matt actually thinks when I was writing that one. That one was more of an outgrowth of his character as opposed to me saying, let's make a wisecrack, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, they've both become catchphrases in our house.
Oh, well, thank you.
Hi. So I can't actually recall if this was in one of the books that you had part in.
Okay, that's fine.
But even just like your opinion on that particular scene, and I'm going to avoid spoilers. But a particular character who has returned to the novice quarters in the White Tower has
a visitor, an unexpected visitor. Yes, the cup of tea. Yes.
My favorite character.
So yes, this is one of the big moments of Gathering Storm, and this was actually one of the scenes that Robert Jordan wrote. I've mentioned before, and it was one of those kind of, what happened with me is, so I had to sign the contract sight unseen. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I didn't know how much of the books were done. Or anything. It was just me saying yes, then signing an NDA, and then I flew to Charleston to meet with Harriet and pick up the materials, which I didn't know how much there was or anything. And so I knew by that point she told me, yes, he did write the last chapter, because those of us who've been following for a long time, I always said he knew the last chapter, but he hadn't written it yet. And so I asked, did he actually write it? And she said yes. So I flew out to Charleston. I walk in the door, like it's a long flight from the West Coast to Charleston, because there's not direct flights to Charleston. It's you gotta transfer and things like that. So I'm getting in at like 10 at night, and I've been flying all day. And so Harriet says, well, I've got some bean soup. I don't know what, things to remember. I have some bean soup. Would you like some bean soup? I'm sure you're famished. I said, no, I'd like the ending, please. With a smile, and so she laughed and led me into the sitting room where she sat down. She went and got it. She brought back the stack of 200 pages that they'd printed out for me, and on the top was actually a post-it note that said, "Who killed Asmodean?" And then from there, I delved into the notes, which the assistants had put in kind of chronological order, what they guessed was chronological order, because there was no chronological order to it. When we obviously the last scene is the last scene, and several of them he said this is prologue, and so it was like a big stuff of prologue we think, and a big stuff of here's the body in the order that it might go in, and then here's the last scene. And that scene that you're talking about was the most jaw-dropping to me. The ending was great. It was perfect. It's not jaw-dropping because you can't be surprised by something when you've been spending 20 years theorizing how it's going to go. It was just the right ending. It was very satisfying. But that moment, I was like, what? Oh, that's interesting. The other one that actually surprised me is at the end of Towers of Midnight, there's a couple of characters who get engaged. And that scene was written by him. And I had not realized that their relationship had progressed to that point. It was only during my reread that I was able to see the hints of it. And even after 20 years, I hadn't, that's one of the things that I'd missed. That one kind of blindsided me. That was the second big surprise. Each of those books had one. There's some surprises in A Memory of Light, don't worry, but I can't talk about those. But really the biggest one was the Cup of Tea chapter. Which, it's a long favorite character of a lot of ours, a revelation about their background. It was really exciting to be part of that one. And I was really glad that he'd written that scene. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's one of those great ones that you're like, yes, I can put this in, and there's something there for fans that's Robert Jordan that I can identify, so, yeah.
The moment there was the comment about her dress,
yes,
I threw the book across the room.
Yep. Yeah. So anyway, there you go.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good thing your books are big, or else, if hardcovers, though, that could start damaging buildings and stuff.
Yeah, so they're good weapons. All right.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'm a huge fan of the Writing Excuses podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I always say it's like a masterclass in genre writing. So I thought you should, for aspiring writers who are in the room, I thought you should take a few minutes and tell them about the podcast in case they don't know about it.
Okay. So what happened is my brother's taking this class in college. My brother's one of these people who take 10 years to get an associate's degree or whatever it is. He's got a good job in IT. It's like he doesn't need a degree, but he feels like he should have one, so he's taking a class here and taking a class there. I see people nodding. You either have done this or have loved ones who've done this. But anyway,
are doing this ourselves.
Yeah, are doing this yourself. So he's he's taking this podcasting class for whatever reason. He's like, hey, you should do one of these, Brandon. I'm like, podcasting. I'm not a radio personality. He's like, no, you should do this. And he had this great idea where he wanted to do this web serial that's adventures and, like an old classic radio drama and all of this stuff. And, all of this writing intensive stuff, which is why he came to me. And I passed on it. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. It sounds fun, but I just have too many things on my plate. There's no way I can write all of this for you. But the idea for a podcast stuck in my brain, and I started listening to some podcasts. I really enjoyed a lot of them I listened to, but it seemed like there was this habitual problem in podcasting where it would be friends sit around a table and chat, and then, you turn on the podcast and it says 1 hour and 30 minutes. And you're like, 90 minutes, guys? Come on. Is there no editing going on? Can't you stick to a point? A lot of them are the 3-hour-long podcast where we're going to, drive to Texas and talk about it. And they'll have this topic on it, be like, we're going to discuss the new Batman movie. And I'm like, oh, good. I want to hear what fellow geeks think about it. And then you see that it's a 2-hour-long podcast, and they're going to talk about Batman for 15 minutes of that. And then the rest is going to be what they had for dinner, because you've been to lots of cons, you've been to lots of panels, you know how it goes. We get off topic, and every discussion of Star Trek turns into an argument of who's the best captain or whatever, and it's the same sort of thing over again. So anyway. I was thinking about this and thought I really would like to do a writing advice podcast. So many people email me wanting advice. So many people like to try to take my class but can't. Often, my class has 15 seats and I have 75 people showing up wanting to add. All of this stuff, and we pack as many in the room as we can. But anyway, I wanted to do something that would let me give some of this writing advice. So I figured I wanted to do a podcast that was short and sweet. I wanted to organize it more like a news program where you have one moderator throwing questions at people and making sure that it stayed on topic, and did it in just a short period of time. I thought 15 minutes was the right amount of time. Just a quick, on-topic podcast, but I can get kind of dry. I've got this university background, right? I just kind of blab. You've been watching me. I do this. And so I'm like, it'll be better if I bring on people who are funny so that people can laugh and then, that are glib but also know their stuff. And so I went and got the two funniest people I know, which are Howard Taylor and Dan Wells, a horror writer and a comic book illustrator and writer. And I figured that would also give some diversity to the podcast. And so we started doing this podcast, and it really took off. It was very popular. And so we eventually added a fourth member because we realized that we were, not as diverse a cast as we could be, considering we were all 3 white dudes from the same town. So we called up Mary, who has a very different perspective on life than us, and had been the best guest on the podcast that we'd ever had. And we figured at that point, the podcast now had a sponsor, Audible, so we could afford to fly Mary out, because we do it in person. We can't, this whole Skype thing, you just don't have the same chemistry. And so we started flying Mary out, and so for now, 2 seasons we've been doing with Mary. And so it's the 4 of us doing writing advice that we just tackle a topic every week and go at it, and we've had a lot of fun with it. We recorded a bunch of episodes before Dan moved to Germany for a little while, and we did cool things like, for instance, we each brainstormed a story. One episode was for each of us, and then we're all writing these stories, which we will then post on the rough drafts, and then we will workshop them on an episode, and so you can see the evolution of the story, and then we'll do revisions. I actually, when I worked on my story, I grabbed one of the screen capture technologies, what's it called, Camtasia, and I recorded myself typing the whole thing. It's long, and I'm like, wow, this is like, me, a computer going for 6 hours. Maybe we can speed it up or something. But I have screen captures of me just typing the whole story, and then I will do screen captures of the revision process and things like this, and then post those so that people can watch a story being built and watch it evolve and watch all this sort of stuff. So it's pretty cool, the podcast. So if you're interested in writing, or even if you just want to hear us sometimes be funny, feel free to listen. It's Writing Excuses. Man, you clap all after every question. You all are so polite. It's like I'm in Canada or something.
Hey, there you go.
Hal-Con.